am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Kara Fitzgerald, the president and CEO of the Tennessee Society of Certified Public Accountants, the premier professional association for certified public accountants in Tennessee. She is responsible for carrying out the mission of TSCPA and works in partnership with the TSCPA Board of Directors and Council to develop and execute the Society's strategic vision, always working to promote, protect, and support the CPA profession in Tennessee. She also works with various committees and represents the membership with various governmental entities, including the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy, the Tennessee Department of Revenue, and the Tennessee General Assembly. She is a licensed CPA in the state of Tennessee and earned the Certified Association Executive Credential, which is the marker of a committed association professional who has demonstrated the wide range of knowledge essential to manage an association in today's challenging times. She also holds the credential of Chartered Global Management Accountant. She is a member of the TSCPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the Tennessee Society of Association Executives, and the American Society of Association Executives. During our discussion, Kara and I talked about her journey from public accounting all the way through to becoming an executive with the Tennessee Society of CPAs. Learn her journey from when she began as a dancer to deciding that she was good at math and becoming an accountant, and then how she asked for what she wanted to achieve the success that she has today. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I'm here with Kara Fitzgerald, the president and CEO of the Tennessee Society of CPAs. So Kara, do you want to just get us started, give a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. I'm currently the president and CEO of TSCPA. I assumed this position in April of this year, so it's fairly to me, but I'd been here 10 years prior to that, so familiar with the organization. I was born and raised just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and I think grew up in a pretty traditional family with my mom and dad and older sister. My parents are high school sweethearts, are still married, and just had a good childhood. Did not grow up around CPAs, but became a CPA and have made this my career.
Well, awesome. So let's dive right in then, just kind of how you grew up. So what did your parents do? What were their occupations?
From the time I was 5 till he retired, my dad worked for a large automobile manufacturer. And my mom was primarily a stay-at-home mom throughout my life, just kept things, running in the family. But there were times throughout my life where she worked primarily retail. And when I think about that now, looking back, it was probably because there were specific needs. There was cars that need to be bought or, college to pay for, things like that. But primarily, especially when I was younger, she was a stay-at-home mom. My dad traveled a lot. He would travel to Japan for, anywhere from 1 to 3 months at a time. And that was kind of just how it was throughout my entire life. That was kind of the norm.
Okay. So how many brothers and sisters or siblings?
I have one older sister. She's a kindergarten teacher. I could not do her job. It is not given the last year. So I certainly look up to her and what she does as an educator.
So with your mom, really being responsible for a lot alone, it sounds like, what kind of things did you start seeing in your mom or maybe learning from her during those times?
I think just the ability to really handle anything. The things that stand out when my dad was gone to Japan was like the time the pipes froze and she had to deal with that. the time our back windshield got shot out by a BB gun by the neighbor kid. You know,
now that's a Tennessee thing.
Always happen when my dad wasn't there, and she just dealt with it. You know, I don't remember her ever not handling things well. She's just a pretty strong individual, still is, and just handled it all with a lot of grace.
And in your childhood, were there certain interests or hobbies that you had?
Yeah, I grew up, my sister and myself both grew up dancing our entire lives almost, or at least young lives. So we took ballet at the Nashville School of Ballet, and that was just a very big part of our life. My mom spent a great deal of time running us from our small town outside of Nashville to downtown Nashville for ballet classes. So it was a big part of my life. You know, it seems like my parents always gave me opportunities to do whatever. I did piano, I, did Girl Scouts, and I just always had opportunities to try different things. And now I think back, I'm sure sometimes that was probably difficult on them. I think we were a pretty average middle class, family, but there's lots of opportunities to try different things. I've tried to do that with my kids too. That was an important part of my childhood.
So what did you enjoy about dancing? Like when you think of back on it?
I love dancing. I still love it. I don't know. I think it's, I personally, I have a comfort level. Like if I'm up in front of a large group, I'm very comfortable with that. I'm probably it pushes me out of my comfort zone to be in smaller groups, whether that's presenting or one-on-one. So, but to be up on a stage performing in a ballet was not scary at all to me. I don't know. It just seemed very natural.
So why do you think that is? Why, reason I ask is, so my son from the time he was young had somewhat of a stutter, but he sang and the stutter would go away. And then I remember we went to London on vacation and he started mimicking the British accent and he wouldn't stutter because he was kind of like thinking ahead. Mm-hmm. So what do you think it is about like performing in front of a large group that doesn't bother you as much versus like one-on-one? Is it because it's more planned out or rehearsed, or?
I don't know. It's like there's power in numbers, and for whatever reason, comfort. I don't know. I've always been that way. I took a lot of speech classes in college, and that didn't bother me at all. But I feel like I've been like that pretty much from a young age. I did 4-H growing up, and I would go do speeches and, for 4-H and in front of, big groups or classes. And it just never has bothered me, but I don't know why. That'd be an interesting thing to explore. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, the things that we don't even realize, we're looking out for, as we get older to kind of, surround ourselves or pivot from something that makes us uncomfortable. So how do you get past it? Because with what you do, it takes a lot of one-on-one, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this position, even just prior to becoming the CEO of TSCPA, it certainly pushed me outside of that comfort zone because there's lots of opportunities to, it's a relationship business. It's about building relationships and engagement. And it's just a matter of, pushing yourself out of that, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Sometimes we have to be uncomfortable. And so it's gotten easier, but, still not 100%. I wouldn't say it just comes just naturally now, but I think my predecessor, Brad Floyd, who was the CEO of the TSCPA, he gave me lots of opportunities to push myself beyond those boundaries and that comfort zone. And that was the best thing that he could have done for me.
So what did he do to do that?
Oh gosh. I mean, giving me opportunities to lead meetings, to go meet with firm leaders across the state of Tennessee. And we had lots of honest conversations about that that was not necessarily where I was most comfortable. And so I'm grateful that he's given me those opportunities.
Yeah. And it does take someone seeing those vulnerabilities to try to help push you in a direction that maybe you don't see yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you did dancing, it's time to go to college. Why did you choose accounting, or what did you initially choose?
growing up, I wanted to be a teacher. I don't know, does every young girl teacher? It seems like it. So I always thought, oh, I'll be a teacher. And then for a very short period of time, I took a career test, I think in 7th grade, that said, I should be a lawyer. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll go to law school. That didn't last very long. Class in high school. And I had always enjoyed math. Now I know that you don't necessarily have to be good at math to become a CPA. But as a 16, 17-year-old, I thought, well, I've always been good at math. I liked the accounting class that I took in high school. And so when I went to college, I said, I'm going to major in accounting, and I never changed it. I just stuck with it.
Yeah. So what was your path with it? So where did you start out?
Yeah, so I graduated college in my late my junior year, early my senior year of college. I got a lot of opportunities. We would, a professor would take a group of us to tour, a firm in Nashville. And so we would go visit what's now, a Big Four firm or a regional firm. And I went to one particular firm, and it just felt right. Like, I thought, I can see myself working here. And so early in my senior year, we were doing mock interviews, just for practice. Mm-hmm. And I happened to get paired up with a partner from this firm that I thought I wanted to work for my mock interview. And so I still laugh because this is very uncharacteristic of me to be like, I think, this forward, but I went into this mock interview basically with the mindset of, I'm going to go in and tell them I want to work there. I'm going to get a job. And I did just that. I said, and I visited your firm. I really just felt at home there, and I would love an opportunity to come to work for you. And, went back, said, we'll see what we can do. And so by September of my senior year, I was graduating in the spring, I had a job offer. Certainly made senior year a little bit easier to know I had that lined up, and went to work for the firm that pretty early on in college I had said, yeah, that's where I'm going to go to.
Isn't that interesting that you did that, but how important it is to ask for what you want?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you found yourself do that any other times?
Well, let's see. I don't know, not as good of an example as that. So I to back up, I went from public accounting, spent a couple of years there, and then went to work for a large healthcare company, and spent a few years there before I got married and moved to Florida. And in Florida, I was looking for a new job. And at that time, I responded to an ad in the newspaper, which makes me sound older than I think I am, because nobody looks for jobs in the newspaper anymore. But I responded to an ad in the newspaper for an accounting manager at the Florida Institute of CPAs.
Oh, okay.
From them. And but it kept like in the back of my mind, I just thought, I think I would really like to work there. I'm a CPA. I had nonprofit clients when I was in public accounting, and they were always my favorite clients to work for. And so I just kept going back to, gosh, I wish they would call. And so I called them and said, I submitted my resume. I haven't heard back, and ended up getting to go in for an interview, and got the position, and spent a few years there until I eventually moved back to Nashville. But now I think back, if I wouldn't have made that phone call,
yes,
said, hey, I'm really interested. That's really what connected me to, when I moved back to Nashville, that connected me to the Tennessee Society of CPAs, that has now provided, the opportunity that I've had for the last 10 years. And now to lead this organization. So it's just funny to look back on how what was a very insignificant action at the time really kind of paved the way for where I'm at now.
But I think, again, it's, I think it was Boyd Search from Georgia that I interviewed, kind of had a similar situation where, what happened? He wasn't getting a response back. If I remember that, this interview was a while back, but it's just kind of funny. It's similar. Maybe it was to the Ohio Society originally or so forth, yeah. But he submitted his resume, but he didn't hear back. He was getting frustrated that he wasn't hearing back from them. So he calls there, and they're like, you didn't put your contact information on the resume.
I hope that's
we
not why the
we
FICPA
wanted to contact you. So thank goodness he called, where he would have felt sitting there offended. There's so many things like we have no
Yeah,
idea on the other side of why they're not calling and why
right.
not just take the chance. And you never
Yeah.
know where. And now he's
And look
the
where that led
CEO.
him. Yeah, very
Yeah.
similar to my experience, although I hope I didn't leave any contact off my resume.
I just thought it was such a funny, story of just like, he was taking a shot at something he'd never done
Yeah,
before. And then,
yeah.
in the process, forgot an important piece of
Mhm.
information.
And in those instances, it's probably in both those examples, in college and then calling FICP, it's like, what do I have to lose, right?
Mhm.
So it's in those moments where it's like, well, I have nothing to lose. I just have everything to gain. And instead of, sometimes in my day-to-day life, I certainly overthink things, but in those instances, it's like, why not?
Right. Well, and I think it's the same thing, as a parallel to what you're talking about with being uncomfortable more one-on-one versus in a group. Like you still got to kind of put yourself out there to get
Yeah.
what you
Mhm.
need to. And,
Right.
what's the
Right.
worst that can happen?
Yep.
It's just to understand like what's your limit of the worst that can happen.
Yeah, right. Where's your
Where's my
threshold
bottom?
of what you can handle?
Yeah. How much am I willing to risk? And
Yeah,
then go from there. Yeah.
yeah.
So what kind of job did you take with the Tennessee Society when you started there?
With the TSCPA or the
Yeah.
FIC? The
Well, once you
TSCPA.
went from FICPA there.
Yeah, when I came to the TSCPA, I started out as director of finance, and got to shadow the person who had been in that position for, I think, about 30 years. So that was just a huge blessing to get to learn from her. And then moved into CFO, and then eventually taking on more of an operational role. Most recently, vice president of operations. So, taking me outside of that, comfort zone of just accounting and really looking at the, entire operations and all that we do for our members. So, is certainly in both my role at the FICPA and the TSCPA has helped me to have a greater appreciation, I think, for the value of an organization like
Mhm.
TSCPA. I had been a member for a long time, but it helps you to understand the value that any professional association, no matter what your profession is, can have.
Well, and I think it's also an important lesson as far as just for accountants as well that are going into advisory services, or when you're talking to accountants about that, is we can get, focused on just the finance department and so forth. But I'm sure in your role as a CFO, once you start getting into operations, you're like, oh, this is a different story, or, and so
Mhm.
forth. So what are
Yeah.
some things that you learned that might have changed your perspective?
I'll go back to earlier in my career when I left public accounting and I went to work for Cigna Healthcare. And that was really the first time that I think I saw, like, you have to work as one organization. So I was working with claims processors and customer service reps and IT and compliance, and kind of putting that whole picture together. And so that's certainly, that experience working there, I think, has helped me to kind of transition into that operational role here at TSCPA. The one thing I've learned is that we're all here serving our members, and that's no matter whether you're in a professional association or any organization, you're here to serve your customers. And so it takes everybody working together, from the communications folks to the technology folks,
Mhm.
in our case, our continuing education department, to really make everything just work together and provide a good customer experience.
Yeah. So with that, so you said the prior CEO really was kind of helping you train to eventually succeed him.
Mhm.
Was that something that you discussed for a while?
It was not something that was even on my radar when I came to work here in 2011. I was at that time really looking for a position that would provide me a little bit better balance between work and family responsibilities. And it certainly did that. So I had no aspirations that I'm going to go to work at the TSCPA and eventually become president and CEO. I'm fortunate that he saw potential in me, and we talked about it for years, really leading up to it. And he, again, provided me tremendous opportunities to really help to prepare me to take on that role.
So when he first brought it up to you, what was that conversation and what was your initial thoughts about it?
Can I do it?
Yeah.
Am I the right person? We were a lot alike in a lot of ways. I don't think he would mind me saying that. We were fairly similar, but we were very different in a lot of ways too. And so, comparing myself to him, he had been here for, 43 years when he retired. So comparing, what I would bring the position to what he had after 43 years was kind of hard for me to even fathom that I could do this position. But I think, he brought it up early enough that I had time to really get comfortable in the prospect of having the role and to start to believe in myself that I could do it.
And what was the shift? When did you start believing that you could?
I think when I started to really feel like I had developed a relationship with members, because it is a relationship business. And so when I started to feel like, okay, I've developed this relationship, I understand their needs, they understand our organization, I can convey the value of TSCPA and identify their needs. That's when it started to click that I can bring something to this organization. I can help to move us into the future.
So as you started making a transition into being a CEO, maybe talk about like how you plan for a transition like that and maybe what you thought versus what reality was once you took the position.
Yeah, I have to say the pandemic certainly impacted that because we were, the selection process was happening right in the height of the pandemic in 2020. And then I was appointed to the position in November, became effective in April of 2021. And so the pandemic just kind of shifted everything. Anything that I would have planned of how I would have handled that transition basically got thrown out because we were kind of in survival mode.
Yeah.
From the very beginning and thinking about taking on the position, I thought I have to have a clear vision of where I see the organization, and I have to have, our leadership on board with that vision. And so that became very important, communicating that and getting a plan in place to get the staff and the leadership on board. And I've had tremendous support in that area. I feel like that's going really, really well. The thing that I don't think I was prepared for of being in a position, especially as operational and working so closely with the directors of our organization, I don't think I was prepared for the shift to not be in what I would say just the day-to-day weeds. And another peer of mine at another state society said it very well. She said, it can be a lonely position, Kara. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all, but I think when you have that transition into a different type of leadership role, it can feel a little bit lonely. And I was not, I would have never used that word, but when she used it, I thought, I think I do feel that way from time to time. And so I don't think I was prepared for that. But then kind of acknowledging it, you say, okay, well, I can get past that. I can get over that. It's just a shift in your mindset.
So what things did you do to shift your mindset with it?
I have a really good relationship. I think I do. I hope my staff would agree with our staff here. I think just thinking that, okay, yes, I handed off more to them to handle the day-to-day than what I used to do. Absolutely. But reminding myself constantly that I helped, just as my predecessor helped to prepare me to take on this role. Hopefully I have helped to prepare them to take on the roles that they're in now. And so instead of looking at it of kind of, I've lost, I'm not involved at the level I used to be, looking at it as in a proud sense that I prepared them to be able to do that, to take on some of those responsibilities.
And I think that's a very important shift. It's hard for a lot of people to not micromanage in leadership roles because you're like, well, I know the way I did it, or and that's the way. So how do you help people learn and grow and then advise them on different ways they could do it rather than trying to have everyone do that
Do it
as
the
well.
exact same way I would do it. Exactly.
Yeah. So, with the team that you have, is it mostly people that you've worked with prior, or have you had to bring in new people?
It's a combination. A few of our leadership team have been long-term employees here. And then we have, I hired a new COO to take on the position I had previously. So he's brand new to the organization. And then we've added some other new staff as well, just to kind of expand upon some of the skill sets that we needed.
So how do you go about that of hiring, so you've got like your comfort level with people you worked with and then bringing someone new. And now with you not doing the work or the way that you would, what are you looking for now in different
I mean,
roles?
I think, I have to remind myself it's a gradual process that, that this transition is going to take quite some time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And, we have to learn about each other and learn how to work together. I've had the benefit of doing that with some of the other staff over the last 10 years, and that it's just going to take time to understand, their work habits and for them to understand mine, and that we'll get there, but not to, not to expect it to all fall into place overnight. It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So how are you feeling about just, getting through the pandemic, coming in new in this role, just, the effect the pandemic's had on state societies and so forth? What do you think is been a benefit or things that have pulled back for state societies that you might be looking to the future for innovation or things like that because of it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to serve our members in a different way and to potentially engage with them, more or differently than what we were doing. We obviously had to pivot everything to virtual. Last year, we weren't holding any in-person events. Everything became virtual. There's some things that I think we won't go back to, or that we will shift slightly. We may not go back to the number of in-person events that we had previously. We will them, but maybe the virtual events begin to become more and more compared to what we were doing previously. We're looking at new ways when we can't get out in front of members at meetings across the state or to meet face to face. We're looking at new ways to engage and talk with them through town halls and roundtables and things like that. And so, just continuously looking for new ways to, again, build those relationships. It's never easy, but it's certainly not easy to do when you don't have the benefit of a face-to-face interaction. And then just internally from an operational standpoint, we've gone to more of a flexible, a hybrid kind of work environment. That's something that I think we will continue, potentially long after the pandemic. It has worked well, provides flexibility to our staff. And I know a lot of firms and businesses are doing just that to remain competitive in the market right now. And so, we're trying to offer as much flexibility to our staff to provide some balance to them. That's real important to me because I didn't always do that in my career. And so if I can help them to achieve that, I certainly want to do that.
So how are you noticing the effect on culture going hybrid from when you were all in the office?
Yeah, I think, when we went all out of the office for a couple of months and then started to come back into a hybrid model, certainly everyone was very excited just to be around other people after being at home by themselves for a couple of months. I think now we don't take for granted those opportunities when we have one day where everybody is in the office together, and then we have smaller groups the rest of the week. I don't think we take for granted the fact that someone is down the hall from me and I can go have a face-to-face interaction with them. It used to be, well, I'm not going to get up, I'll just send an email or whatever. And now I don't think we take that for granted. We want to get up and have that interaction, and we want to, work together in person.
Great. So I like to close out with some just rapid fire questions. So you pick a category.
Okay.
And the category is family, friends, money, spiritual, or health.
I'll go health.
Okay. Things or actions that I don't have that I want with my health.
Things I don't have that I want.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have what am I trying to say? I don't have a workout routine.
Okay.
routine, and I have no excuse for that. That's what my husband does for a living.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah. So I have opportunity and I have someone to help me through that, but it's just not something that I prioritize. I do it occasionally, but I never get in the habit. And I'm hoping, we all go through phases in our life and maybe eventually that will become a priority, and it's just not, but I wish I did have that routine.
I can tell you as a yoga studio owner, it's the worst with family coming together. Like everybody else will come to yoga, come and take feedback. But if they come and I start training them, like it's like offensive, so it's just different.
We tried that early on in our marriage and just decided it wasn't a good idea. I didn't need him as my trainer.
Exactly. I was just talking to someone about it and then explaining the whole experience, and they're like, oh yeah, that's the way I am with my wife, who's a yoga teacher too. So things or actions I do have that I want. So something you want to keep.
Health related. I think I have good genes. So I think my parents in their 70s, very healthy, have always lived active lifestyles and been good examples of, eating well and taking care of themselves. So I think I have good genes and like just good examples as it related to health.
Okay. Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want as far as my health.
I don't think I have bad habits, or like I don't do things. I don't eat in excess, drink in excess, things like that. So I don't think I have any bad health habits.
Okay. And last one, things or actions that I do have that I don't want as far as your health.
Do you have, I would say, just the tendency to worry. It's terrible for your health. And I'm definitely a worrier and always have been since I was very, very young, but I wish I didn't have a trait.
Well, it's a natural human condition, right? It's just knowing when it's happening. That's the first step.
Yeah, you gotta be aware. That's true.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with, a message or anything we didn't talk about today that you want to make sure people come away from this interview with?
I mentioned it earlier. I think just the value of professional membership associations to your career, whether you're a CPA or not, there's a professional association for almost any industry or profession that you might be in. And the value that those organizations can provide to protect your profession, in our case, the CPA license, is just tremendous. So I encourage folks to get engaged with their professional associations and be involved. A big part of what we do is to advocate for the CPA profession. And while our advocacy efforts can benefit anyone who's a CPA, whether they're a member or not, we certainly have a louder voice the more members that we have. So just encourage folks to engage and consider membership in their professional associations.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I once heard a speaker talking about, so there's an association for speakers, and he was up against another speaker for a potential conference. And he said, well, they're not a member of association. Do you in your industry expect people to support their associations? Like, and it's an important thing is to find your place of how you support it, because the lobbying efforts and everything else, children and all other types of things that go on in the state societies, people don't even realize how much,
especially in the last year with the pandemic and so much going on, that affecting the business environment and just the CPA profession at large. It's just never a better time to be a member.
That's true. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And
Thanks
I really appreciate you coming on.
All right. I appreciate it. Thanks, Amy.
And now for our mindful moments with this discussion that I had with Kara Fitzgerald about her journey from the time when she was young to becoming the CEO of the Tennessee Society of CPAs. And I think there were some great stories in here, or life lessons that were really helpful. One of them being when she was young and her mom was taking care of a lot of things around the house because her father traveled to other countries. And watching her mom take it in stride and make sure that everything got done, I believe from the stories that Kara talked about how important that's been in her own development in managing everything between work and life, and also still managing to move forward in her career as well. And what we talked about was in the beginning when she was a dancer growing up and how much enjoyment she got from dancing, and her comfort level of being in front of groups rather than maybe talking one-on-one or being in small groups, and how she's had to push herself out of her comfort zone so that she could feel comfortable doing those things. And I think it's important that we not only observe the things that we're good at, but also observe the things that we would like to grow in. And it's not a negative to find the things that are maybe not our strong suit, but it is important that we do think about how we go about improving those areas of ourselves, that life is a journey. So we're never in maintenance mode with what we do. If we want to grow and learn and move into other areas in life, that sometimes we have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. And a lot of interviews that I've had, we've talked to people that are introverts and how they've had to push themselves from being an introvert to feeling comfortable in front of people and what things work for them. And with this one, this was kind of a hybrid, is that not necessarily an introvert, but just that comfort level of not having a planned meeting or agenda or in a recital that you know what you're going to do for the dance, rather than when you meet in smaller groups, it can be more organic. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable. I know for myself that I definitely come off as extroverted, and, I'm a keynote speaker and I get on stage, but people are all often mistaken that I want to be part of a big party. And for me, my comfort level a lot of times is to be with smaller groups, that after I get off stage, or to go to a dinner or things like that, rather than big events. And so I like the big events. I'll always have fun, but that actually takes more energy for me. And it's important to understand what creates energy for us, what detracts energy for us, and what we need to do in order to balance that. And so, really in a lot of this discussion, she talks so many times about really getting out of her comfort zone or pushing herself. One being when she asked for the job that she wanted in a CPA firm that she really identified as the right fit. The other one was when she went to the FICPA and called them when she wasn't hearing back from them to make sure that she got the role that she really wanted. And I think a lot of times we will step back and just wait for someone to reach out to us. And if we really want something, really understanding what's the worst that can happen, that if we ask the question, and if we're okay with what the worst that can happen, just do it. Don't overthink it. Don't overanalyze it. Don't overplan it. Just do it and see what the result could be. So worst thing happens is you don't get the job, or you don't get the opportunity that you're calling about. But the best thing that can happen is actually getting the thing that you want. And so not passing those by was a great example in her story as well. I also liked her observation of understanding how important it's been to get into operations as a finance professional, to really truly understand what customers want, how to be a better internal partner to other people in your firm or a corporation, so that you're actually delivering the kind of information that people want. And when we talked about her CEO at the Tennessee Society really identifying that she would be a great candidate to succeed him, that he talked to her about it. And I think a lot of times we have in our mind that someone can succeed us or they can move into another role, but we don't necessarily tell them, so they could start thinking about the things that they need to do to prepare. And because he had that discussion with her, they were able to actually step back and say, here are the things that are my gaps in order to do that role. And I need the opportunity to be able to explore that so I can do a better job. So all of these things were really important lessons, I thought. in transitioning in your life, your career, whatever it is. But really remembering that relationships and all the things that we need, it's not just us alone, but relationships are what helps us move into other things that we want to do. So really stepping back maybe today and thinking about what are those things that are your gaps? What relationships can you call upon to help you grow and learn and be able to achieve the things that you want to in your life? Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.